Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Undertale English and Japanese comparison. In the last episode we went on a date with Papyrus, and today we're finally moving on to Waterfall. Our first order of business in Waterfall is meeting Undine. Well, meeting is probably not the right word, more like overhearing the conversation between her and Papyrus. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but maybe you've noticed, I and many other people pronounce his name as Papyrus. However, the Japanese translation renders his name as Papirusu, which is closer to the papyrus pronunciation which some people use, and by the way, this is how I initially thought his name was pronounced. But anyway, back to Undine. What's interesting to note is that Papyrus uses polite speech when talking to her, a first for him. He also refers to her as Taicho, which is a term that means leader or commander. In English, when he tries to persuade Undine not to harm the human, he says, "You don't have to destroy them." In Japanese, he says, "Betsu ni korosanakutatte," datte, meaning that he outright uses the word kill here. Adding on to this, here's what Papyrus says about Undine in one of his later phone calls. Her opinion of you is very murdery. This was translated as, "それを知りたがってた友達はね、貴様に殺人願望を抱いているんだ." Satsujin Gambo literally translates to something like intention to murder. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the abandoned Kish. In case you didn't know, this is a recovery item found in a secret room next to the bridge seat puzzle in Waterfall. Many players are likely to miss this item unless they already know it's there, but it's an interesting one. First of all, there is an eco flower next to the bench in the room where you find it. In Japanese version it says, "Gomen yo Kishu, ore ni wa sekiin ga omosugita," which translates to, "I'm sorry Kish, the responsibility was too much for me." In English this line is a bit more ambiguous. It says, "I just wasn't ready for the responsibility." The popular theory is that Sans was the one who left the Kish under the bench, but you might recall that Sans uses oira as his pronoun, but whoever left the eco-flower message uses ore, which throws a wrench in this theory, as long as you're playing in Japanese anyway. Also, if you call Papyrus in this room, in English he'd say, "What's better than a bench full of Kish?" which was translated as, "Benchi ni ippai naranda kishu ni masaru mono nashi." There is nothing better than a bench full of Kish. Another interesting item you can get in the Waterfall area is the punch card, which you can obtain from the ice cream guy in a room right next to where you can meet Sans with his telescope. This item raises the strength of punching attacks, which obviously relies on the pun between a punch card and punching, but surprisingly enough, this pun still works in Japanese without needing to change it at all, because in Japanese you can just use the English words for both punching and the punch card. Next is not an item, but Onion-san, quite possibly the most forgettable character in all of Undertale. In Japanese his name wasn't changed, which is a bit odd, as you don't typically add honorifics to your own name, and doing so would make you sound quite weird, which I mean Onion-san is. And no, the san isn't a part of his name because Onion is written in katakana while san is in hiragana. This was a rather puzzling change to his last line, where in English he says, "I'll see you around, have a good time in Waterfall." Yes, the waterfall is long like that. In Japanese, this long waterfall was changed to a series of onomatopoeia for bubbling, for whatever reason. Next, let's talk about the treasure room, the one which is unlocked with the piano puzzle. First of all, when you enter the room and try to take the treasure, you have to get rid of the dog. When you do that, in English, you get the text, "You deployed the dog." In Japanese, it simply says, "Inu o jimen ni oita." You put the dog on the floor. The dog residue item you get from completing the puzzle was translated as "Inu no otoshimono," which literally means something like something a dog dropped, and from what I've read, it can be used for the kind of droppings you're probably thinking about right now. And keep in mind that the protagonist is carrying this in their pockets. Now I guess we should go over the enemies found in Waterfall. First of all, Aaron. His name didn't change in Japanese, but what's really interesting is in the name. First of all, in English, Aaron's description explains the HP acronym as horsepower. In Japanese, this is gon, and it just rendered as HP with bariki the Japanese word for horsepower in parentheses next to it, which makes little sense in Japanese. Aaron also uses a different style of emotes in Japanese, as well as little star symbols which weren't there in the English version. Next there is Woshua, whose name also didn't change, but there was a slight change to his description. The English version describes Woshua as a humble germaphobe. The Japanese text drops the word humble here. If you ask him to clean you, in English he would say green is clean, which was translated very literally in Japanese, where he says green wa clean. Woshua also has several phrases with wash you, for example wash you leg. This was rendered as just regular Japanese in the translation. Next up is Shiren, whose name also didn't change, though there was a slight change to her description. In English it says she's too ashamed to sing her deadly song. In Japanese it's Jigoku no utagoe o hirou suru yuki ga nai. Jigoku no utagoe is less of a deadly song and more like hellish voice. Then there is Moldbik, whose Japanese name is Dekakabi, a combination of Dekai and Kabi. Its English description says one size greater than mold average. Mold average was translated into Japanese as Futsu Kabi, which is just a combination of Futsu and once again the Japanese word for mold. Also, the Anhak option was translated as Hotteoku, which means leave be or leave alone. Finally, there is the Mad Dummy, the mini-boss of Waterfall. In Japanese, his name was translated as Punska Mannequin. Punska is a sound one makes when angry, and it's a word especially used for when a little girl inflates her cheeks in irritation. If you watch anime, you probably know what I'm talking about. In English, he refers to his little helpers as dummies, which has a dual meaning because, well, of course they are dummies, literally, but this word can also refer to somebody who's not very bright. In Japanese, he calls them dekunobo, which is kind of similar because it's a word that can either refer to a wooden doll, but it can also mean blockhead or good for nothing. And also, dummy bots became mannequin robo. There's a bit of a funny change to one of Mad Dummy's lines after he summons the dummy bots. In English he says, these guys are even worse than the other guys. In Japanese it's Koitsu da sakki no yatsura yori mo gomi da zo, which literally means they're even more trash than the other guys. Then we have him saying, I don't need friends, I've got knives. In Japanese, this line was translated as Nakama nanka iranai yo, ore ni wa kono naifu ga aru. The difference is that in English he uses the plural for knives here, but in Japanese it's clear from the beginning that he's only got one knife. Then, at the end of the battle, when he says that this fight is going to last, and I quote, forever, 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 in Japanese each forever is a different word. Eikyū ni, eien ni, itsumademo. And that's all for the monsters that appear in Waterfall. But before we end the video, let me talk about a change that's not really a change, but it gives the Japanese players a hint that the English players didn't have. You might recall that when you drop from a bridge after Undine attacks you and the protagonist blacks out, you hear a voice. In Japanese, this voice uses boku for its pronoun, and there is only one character we've met so far that also says boku. Can you remember who it is? And on that note, that's all for this episode. I hope you're having a great day, and I see you next time.